how would you define school avoidance? This is above and beyond somebody missing a day of school here and
Yes.
there.
This is when a child has severe emotional discomfort, distress about going to school. They might not be able to stay in school the whole day. They might not be able to get up in the morning and go to school.
Listen, I've had challenges with this myself. You've had challenges with this. I can say from firsthand experience, it is a very, very stressful thing for the parent. We end up parenting from fear. If a parent suspects that they're challenged with what I'm going to put under this umbrella of school avoidance, a child that just is absolutely refusing to go, what is the first step that they should take? Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Flip Your Mindset. I am your host, Stacey Uhrig, and today I have Jayne Demsky joining me. This is the second time Jayne's been on Flip Your Mindset. I'm really excited to have her back. In her first appearance with us, she talks about her personal journey, her family's personal journey with school avoidance. She had a child that was struggling with anxiety and was having a very difficult time getting into school. And it was through that experience that she started to learn the ins and outs of why this is becoming such a challenge. And she actually went ahead. I love people who do this, where they actually look for solutions, they actually create something great out of a challenge. And she became the founder of the School Avoidance Alliance. This is a national organization, guys. And so what she's going to do today as our guest is really talk about, okay, we have a kid that's avoiding school. How are we working with the schools? What is the school's responsibility in this? Okay. So that's where we're going to be going with it today. If you want to hear about Jayne's story, you can always go and take a look at that. That is a link that's in the show notes. But welcome, Jayne. How are you?
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk about this part of the journey with school avoidance because it is so important and one of those elements that is unknown to parents because, first of all, we might not know the inner workings of the school district. And secondly, school avoidance is such a different animal and schools might not know how to handle it. They might misinterpret the federal education and disability laws, and parents need to understand their rights. So I'm ready to talk about
this
that.
is your zone of genius. So let's just get started on this. I think we just need to just really real quick, in case somebody hasn't listened to the first episode yet, how would you define school avoidance? This is above and beyond somebody missing a day of school here and there.
This is when a child has severe emotional discomfort, distress about going to school. They might not be able to stay in school the whole day. They might not be able to get up in the morning and go to school. And when you see a pattern of this happening, it is school avoidance. And it's pretty obvious because it's just not that regular, I have a stomach ache or something. It's distressful and you will know because you will feel sickening in your stomach that you feel like, what the heck is going on with my child?
Right. And so listen, I've had challenges with this myself. You've had challenges with this. I can say from firsthand experience, it is a very, very stressful thing for the parent. We end up parenting from fear, which we talked about in the first episode. Mm-hmm. If a parent suspects that they're challenged with what I'm going to put under this umbrella of school avoidance, a child that just is absolutely refusing to go, what is the first step that they should take? Because I know when I was in this situation, I had it in two different scenarios. I didn't know where to turn. I felt like I was on an island on my own, my husband and I.
Yeah. So it's really important to let the school know what's going on from the beginning. What happens is we, again, don't know what schools have this inner sanctum of what's called in different school districts, different things, the child study team, the student support team, which is made up of caseworkers, social workers, school psychologists, and sometimes in different school districts in different states, they call them pupil personnel workers. But these are the people who are there to help children, kids be successful, regardless of their disability. So when we talk about school avoidance, usually school avoidance is caused by either a mental health challenge and or a learning difference, or a learning difference is not being addressed appropriately with modifications, accommodations, services. So therefore, this is a disability. Now, this is where it gets tricky because sometimes if schools aren't educated, and unfortunately most haven't gotten a comprehensive education on school avoidance, they don't understand that missing school is caused by something else and that the child is not being difficult or oppositional. It's not a behavioral opposition. It is a inherent problem with this disability, which we might not know what it is, whether it's emotional, mental health, and or learning difference. So schools need to hear from the parent first because they might be thinking, what the heck's going on? Is there this kid's truant? Where is Charlie? Where is he? So from the get-go, the parent needs to explain to the school, I know where my child is. He is dealing with something that we feel and we've learned is school avoidance and we need your help. That is step one. And also it's important who you talk to as well, because the different layers in the schools are, obviously, for elementary school, it's the teacher, then is the principal in terms of the hierarchy of people you contact for help. Middle school and high school, they might say, call the guidance counselor or the counselor as it's known in different school districts. Sometimes the counselor does not have training on school avoidance, oftentimes. So they might not really understand what's going on. So it's very important. Again, it all comes down to parents educating themselves. That's why our website
we're
exists.
Doing this.
And our parent course exists because parents need to be educated. We cannot assume that school districts have this understanding. Now think about it from their perspective. They have a million things on their plate teaching. Their schools are short-staffed, and their priorities for professional development funds. So we sell our School Avoidance Educator course to schools. We are competing all the time with different funding issues. If a school wants to prioritize it and has found the funds to make it work, they will be educated. But some schools don't realize this is a priority, so they might not be educated. So as parents, what we often do, and I did this and didn't learn that I shouldn't have done this until afterwards, is that we are an equal part of the collaborative team between the parent and the school. No matter what team you're dealing with, the parent is an equal part. We don't think of ourselves that way because we are not educators, we don't work in schools, and we're not professionals, so we defer to them. But the truth is that they need your input because they might not know best practice, evidence-based strategies, and what's best for your child. So first contact the school, then start doing your own education on school avoidance.
I think that latter part is so important. I think as parents, we assume that the school understands all aspects of school and schooling and educating a child and the issues with school avoidance. We just assume if they're supposed to be going to school and they can't get to school, then the school should have a very deep understanding of this. And I know from my own personal experience, one of the many things that I've learned through my own advocacy for my kids is I cannot assume that they know what they're supposed to know. And I had to become the expert on so many different things. And for those parents that are listening, listen, I understand the frustration in having to become the expert. And it can be a rage-filled situation. Like it can make you so angry that you have to become the expert on something that is well above and beyond what's affecting just your child. There are probably tens, hundreds of students in the district with the same challenge. And to Jayne's point, maybe they haven't earmarked funding to become schooled within the school. So you have to become the expert. And when you do that, sometimes you are seen as the problem. Sometimes you'll be seen as the squeaky wheel. They don't like it. But One of the things that's not in the job description of Parenting 101 is fierce advocacy. And no one can fight for your child like a parent. And trust me, you'll be labeled up and down, the difficult parent, the loud parent, the whatever parent. But when you go in assuming that the school will know best and the school will do what is right, you may or may not experience that. And then the onus really is on you at that point in that scenario. But here's what I want to say. I have to put my glasses on, guys. Okay. So one question I have is, you mentioned you have to let the school know what's going on. What happens when then the school puts the onus back on the child? And meaning they just have to find a way to get in. Right? Like they're now kind of almost shaming and blaming the child for not being able to. They see it as choice. And I think this is a big, big part of the understanding.
This is, that's a huge part. And that is one of the deep-seated problems with school avoidance, that there's a misunderstanding and misinterpretation and misconception of what it is,
Right.
So it's really important at that point for the parent to say, my son or daughter, they have a suspected learning issue. They have a diagnosed mental health issue. We are trying our best. We know from what we've learned, this is school avoidance, and it's not, buck up and go to school. There are other best practices and strategies that need to be used. And this is what we've learned from School Avoidance Alliance or whatever that needs to be done. Now, the delivery and working with the school is very important too. It's a nuanced tone because no one wants to be spoken down to and spoken to like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. So the delivery again has to be nuanced, and how, it always has to be tempered with, thank you so much for your help. This is what I've learned. What do you think? What do you think? And presenting the information. Try not to shove it down their throat, because then people just, we get defensive when they tell us what to do, right? So, it's all how it's presented. And I want to also say that, yes, it's intimidating and scary when you are overwhelmed with your child, breaking down. If your son, like I had this with my son, he was falling apart in his bedroom. And then I had to contend with understanding what was going on and dealing with the school district and dealing with a mental health professional and the other people and your husband and your friends or your partner, grandparents and everyone that,
everybody has an opinion.
Right. Everyone has an opinion. So it's really important to understand that the reason we created our website and our parent masterclass is to help relieve you of these hours of painful research, Googling online. I can't tell you how many hours and hours and hours I did of I got deep in the trenches of case law because I couldn't find any case law regarding this because I didn't have an attorney at that point. And I was trying to understand, am I crazy, or are they really just totally ignoring me or not treating this appropriately? So again, we've made it easy for you. There's free information on the website, and our course is really a low price, but it's going to save you. This is not about selling the course. I just want to tell you.
No, absolutely not. But guys, I'm telling you, as someone who went through this, I did not know of Jayne. I found out about Jayne through somebody else I interviewed for my podcast, actually. And to her point, I also it was like a full-time job. Getting educated on myself as to what I was experiencing. And let's not, and I want to get to this next part, but let's not gloss over the fact that as the parent, and I'm assuming there's a lot of parents listening, and there might be some educational professionals listening, right? So that's good too, because maybe they find out about you and they can bring it to the district. But there is a level of shame that the parent experiences.
Yes.
That I really want to touch on before we get to this next question.
Sure,
because you just mentioned it. It's like you're dealing with all the expectations and the questioning and the influence from not just the district. Why can't you get your kid into school? Shame. from maybe your spouse, from maybe your parents, from maybe your sister or your brother, or I can get my kid to school. It must be your kid's problem. Okay. And it's so important that we talk about this because that's the that's the inference. The inference is your kid's the problem or you don't know how to parent. And whether or not that's the message that the person's trying to get across, it's probably not the message that they're trying to get across, but that will be the way it is perceived because there's a level of sensitivity of why can't I figure this out for my child? And if the district is putting the onus back on the family, okay, then it's sending the message to the family, we're the problem. So with that being said, what are the legal rights of the family and what is the legal responsibility of the district?
Okay. So the laws state, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act state that every child is entitled to a free, appropriate public education regardless of their disability. They call it in legal terms FAPE, FAPE. And so that means that the school cannot discriminate against your child because they can't access their education. And they can't access their education because their school avoidance, which is caused by what we talked about, could be mental health, it could be learning difference. And usually it is also a bunch of co-occurring factors. It doesn't make it simple, unfortunately.
It could be school bullying, by the way, as well.
Of course it could be bullying. Right, yeah. Toxic teachers, that happens as well. And so the school district, this is the problem as well, because schools don't understand school avoidance. Not all of them. Again, I'm talking generalities. So if a school doesn't understand school avoidance, they're saying, it's not our problem. It's their problem. Schools who understand it and believe in collaborative relationships and are progressive, they will get that this is about parent and school collaboration. I mean, that is just the bottom line of success. In addition to early intervention, proper interventions, parent-school collaboration is the other factor toward the biggest factor for improvement and success. And schools talk about it all the time in their literature, and the state guidance for every school that's having an attendance problem right now talks about parent-school collaboration. But what does that mean? So again, we have to dig deep. What does that mean? They need to first understand what school avoidance is so they can have empathy and understanding towards us. And then we have to work together on what needs to be done. A lot of the times it's, school-related factors that aren't necessarily coming from the child or their home, or they are, intertwined. I also want to say to parents, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. Unless you're willfully telling your child you don't want them to go to school. That's different. But if you're listening to this, that's not you.
Listen, what if someone's listening? And this is, I think, pretty important because this also comes into the legality of things. I do want to keep going down the legal route because I want to talk about not just FAPE, but IDEA as well, if it comes up. But what if someone's listening and says, well, my child doesn't have a disability?
Right.
Well, I'll tell you this, ding, 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 listeners, say your child is challenged with anxiety. That in theory can be the disability. If it's depression, that can be the disability. You'd need to go get a note from a therapist or a mental health practitioner, but you can get services, 504s, in theory, I'm going to put in quotes, from your district for something like that. It doesn't have to be a learning difference. It doesn't have to be a learning disability. Mental health is health. And if your mental health is challenged, just like a physical health challenge, you can get the appropriate support. You need to know your rights. Right?
Children are entitled, I see if I remember this, I haven't read it in a million years, but it's on my website and all my guides and on my course. A child is entitled to a 504 if what they are dealing with, and we're not saying what it is affecting one major life activity. So like in a school avoidance child, the life activity might be accessing their education. It might be leaving their house. It might be getting dressed in the morning. So 504 to qualify is easier, but again, I know that I'm just skirting over something, but it is in all of our documentation on our website. And 504s, the difference between a 504 and an IEP, a 504 does not have services attached to it, and a 504 doesn't have as many what is it called? Policies and procedures and laws behind it to hold it accountable. So
Right.
like for an IEP, there has to be a meeting every year. And if your child has an IEP, you can call a meeting whenever you want. You can for a 504 as well, by the way. You can do whatever the heck you want, ask for a meeting, whatever you want. But
Right.
this is built into the structure of this instrument, the IEP. And an IEP is if you feel that your child, and this happens, and this is something that, I really have learned over the last 10 years, I feel differently about that. Some of our kids don't belong in these large public schools, that there are other places that they will do better. It could be a smaller public school. It can be an alternative program. It could be anything. There's so many different schools these days. That's a whole other topic of conversation. But if you want the district to pay for what's called an out-of-district placement, you first need the IEP because you have to prove that the child was still not able to be successful or access their education with the IEP.
Right.
So, just wanted
right. No, it's so important. I just had someone I was, communicating with recently, and this is important. Like, just because you have a 504 and just because you have an IEP doesn't mean that the district's going to follow the rules either.
Yes.
Okay. Which also can cause school avoidance.
Yes.
So I know of people who's had a child with an IEP, and the IEP very clearly stated that certain things could be excused as an absence or tardiness because of the disability, and the district was not following through, hence causing more stress and anxiety for the child, which was causing more school avoidance. So I know that this is a frequent thing. I know it happens a lot.
Yeah.
So getting back to what is the responsibility of the district, and what is the language that a family can use with the district to get them to take ownership of their part of the equation?
Well, it's really important for the IEP is not a magic bullet. And what often happens is that schools might use a boilerplate, which means standard phrases or accommodations and modifications built in, not necessarily addressing your child's specific needs. So you need to look at that. Another problem with IEP sometimes is the language is all about helping the child when they're in school. It has nothing to do about helping them get to school. This is a huge, huge issue. So we say the IEP has to address the school avoidance and what the school is going to do to help, what their plan is to help, not what the parent is going to do. It's what the school is going to do.
And it's usually what is the child going to do?
Right. It is always what the child's going to do. The child's
it's
going to
what
do
the
this.
child is going to do, which a lot of times negates the disability, guys. Like, you have to become the expert of your child and have a voice.
Yeah.
And you have the right to use your voice. And you don't have to worry about people at the district being upset with you, or the people at the district not liking you or not being happy with you, because it doesn't really matter. It's not a fair game. You're not there to play ball. You're there to help your kid, right? So I really do want to focus a little bit on, how the school trying to empower the family. So one of the things you were talking about is not all schools understand school avoidance. And my question for that is, what questions should a parent or family ask to help vet or determine how well educated a district is on school avoidance? How can they get that piece of data?
I would ask, how have you helped other school avoidance students in the past? What have you seen worked? What has not? What kinds of plans or procedures are in place that you have used, or interventions that have worked for them?
I
See
think
what
that
they
that's
say.
key, and that's what I was thinking too. It's like, what policies and procedures do you have in place for school avoidance? And can you please send them to me?
And they might say, well, we don't have anyone else with school avoidance, which is not true. That
Okay,
just
so let's
means.
talk about that, because again, this episode is designed to empower,
Mhm.
right? And we know that there can be a lot of misfacts or untruths being shared with parents. Let's just put it that way. So,
Yeah.
if a district says we don't have that, what should be a good response on the family's part?
Well, say, let's work together. I have these great resources, and let's work on what's worked out there regarding the real world and evidence based from all the studies. And this is what I have. This is what I have learned. This is what we should be doing. A reintegration plan, exposure therapy type reintegration. I'm not going to go through everything,
Yeah, of
but
course.
and tell them that they can get educated on school avoidance. And this is not only going to help with your child, but they are going to learn how to be successful from this experience with you, parent, for all the other kids that come behind come behind your child or
Yeah.
with your child, because it's going to make them focus and prioritize that, yeah, this is a problem. Now we got to figure it out. This parent has showed us, okay, we're going to learn with her and work with her or him or they and figure it out and use this knowledge. It's knowledge. It's not, schooling them. It's empowering them.
Is it fair to say that at each level, elementary, middle, and high school, that the appropriate person for the family or the parent to go to would be to start with the principal? Is that the right place to start? Or is it with the school psychologist? Is it head of guidance? Where's the first place for them to start?
Yeah, this is a tough situation because schools have their own protocols. Like, I want you to go to the counselor first, the guidance counselor.
Okay.
Now, that was my mistake for all these years. And also, I don't want to downplay counselors. Everyone has different levels of experience and training. So these days, I'm happy to say when schools are buying our professional development, they know to include their counselors, their guidance counselors, because they are at the front line. But historically, for some reason, guidance counselors were not privy to all the professional development, say, that social workers and school psychologists were. So that's just about that position and how things have changed. So back in the day when we were dealing with this, they didn't know school avoidance, and they were just using their whatever information they had along the way. And I was asking them, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was saying, I want a 504, I want a 504. I didn't know what I was asking for. And they would never really address it or answer me. It was like years. And then I realized, duh, I'm supposed to put that in writing, not to my
Yeah.
guidance counselor, to my director of special education. So I always vary on this answer because the school is going to try to push you one way or the other. They might get mad at you and say, oh, you didn't follow protocol. You can always play stupid and say, I didn't know. And maybe send a letter, an email to the director of special ed or the director of student services or the dean of the school. It depends on the different school district, and explain what's going on and how you need their help, and see who they say you should work with first.
Mm-hmm.
And then you will have to make note if that person, you feel they are educated and able to help you with proper interventions. And if not, you need to reach out to the director of special ed and say, can you bring in, you can even request, hey, can you bring in the school psychologist? Can you bring in the social worker? Can you bring in someone who's worked with kids with school avoidance? Yeah, it all depends on the school district. So I did learn after that I was barking up the wrong tree, always talking the guide and the counselor. And at some point, I did call the school psychologist and the social workers myself, and they would bounce me back. But
This is kind of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I'm so glad you're sharing that because, again, we make all these assumptions, big school district, little school district, that, one hand talks to the other. not the case, right? And so if someone doesn't
All the time, yeah.
know, they tend to just like shove you off to the next person, and there's
Yeah.
no continuity. There's no one that knows anything. You're retelling your story 100 times over, trying just to get anybody to listen.
Right. I
And
just want to interject for 1 second before I forget, because I will
yeah,
forget. So when you do start talking with the school, say, I want one point of contact who's going to help manage, collaborate with me and my child, because I want to work with you. One person who is going to be the communicator, but make sure that person is the communicator or the manager of all your information, and ask who they talk to. I'm so sorry to cut you off, Stacy, but while I
no,
remember it
it's so
also,
good.
I often hear as well that we can't assume that every teacher knows what's in the IEP. So it's the next stage is when you have the IEP or you have the reintegration plan. I'm so sorry, parents, to give you another job, but it's really important to speak to each teacher and say, are you aware of this? And I want to make you aware. And can you communicate with the other teachers? So like, you are modifying the work, that we all are on the same page.
I mean, this
This
is such a
happens all the time.
huge topic. And, it's so important for people to understand what you just said, because whether you have, let's talk about what the 3 levels of support, quote unquote, are in a district. The first is what's called an RTI plan, or some schools will call it an I&RS plan.
Mhm.
Okay. So that is not enforceable by law. It's something that a district creates within their own system. That's
Mhm.
like a stepping stone. It's like, let's just see if we can come up with a few intervention strategies ourselves to help your child get on track with whatever. The teachers are going to be given this. They're also being given 504s. They're also being given, IEPs. Not every teacher is getting the appropriate support that they need to manage all of that. Because remember, if you're a geology teacher, you didn't go to school for special ed. So like if it's special ed teacher or a geology teacher, geometry teacher, any kind of teacher has X number of students with IEPs or 504s or RTI plans in a classroom with no support, the teacher is also being set up to fail as much as your child is.
Well, that's a good point. It's very
right?
true.
Because
Very
they
true.
can't possibly manage it all.
No, I
And
know.
yet they're being asked to. So it's the unfortunate reality that you as the parent have to get involved. And I hate to say that, but I just know from firsthand experience, you have to, because unless you can create a relationship with each individual teacher in the classes that your child needs the support, if they're not being given the appropriate support, it's your only hope, and it's not guaranteed to work. So the first level of support is this RTI plan. Okay. I think every district by law has to have some sort of RTI level of support. If that's not working, then you're going for the 504. And I think what you were trying to describe before, as far as like what qualifies somebody for a 504, they have to have something that's limiting their ability of a daily living activity, learning of which could be one, could be. Now, here's the thing that they won't tell you. If they deny you a 504, it's because they've met and they've ranked the child on a scale of 1 to 5. And if the child ranks at a 1, 2, or 3, they are not going to get the 504. If they get ranked at a 4 or a 5, they will. By law, if you give a district a diagnosis that's asking for accommodations, they need to give the 504. Not every district will do that. They will lie to you. They will tell you that they're not eligible. They will not show you the forms all the time. And they really won't give any explanation. They'll just say, we met as a committee and that person and your child doesn't qualify. unless you're willing to fight for and you need to ask the right questions. I want to see the documentation from the meeting. I want to see where you ranked my child. No one's going to tell you this stuff. And they're not going to
No.
invite you to the meeting, by the way. And they're not even going to tell you when the meeting is. But if your child is denied that, this is basically what they're saying in short term. I'm not willing to meet your child where they are. Your child has to meet us where we are. And when that is the message over and over and over again, show me a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old that's not going to want to stay under the covers because they're being set up to fail.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Do you feel that?
Yeah, it just hit home again when you said that to me.
I mean, it's horrible. So it's so important as the parent that you know your rights. It's so important.
Can I ask you a question, Stacey?
Yes.
That document you referred to, the grading system, I've never seen that. Have you seen that?
I sure have. After the fact.
I would like to see, well,
I'd love to send you one.
I would like to see it. I'm sure that there is
I'd be very happy to send it to you.
I'm sure there's a blank one online that is filled out a form because I never even knew that.
But it's nothing I've ever filled out. It's internal to the district and it's a state form.
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically determining how limiting the condition is. They're not looking at what the doctor's note is. They're not looking at the testing. They're determining internally and possibly disregarding the recommendation from the professional.
Or what you're saying, totally.
Right?
Yeah. So the lawyers always do say, I'd like to see in writing why, explain to me why my child does not qualify.
I didn't even know that document existed till well after the fact. So I'm like you, Jayne.
I never heard, I didn't know that was one.
It's when what Jayne does is so great because she's now giving you like the inside and what you need to do through her course, right? You don't know what you don't know, and no one's going to tell you unless you have been able to befriend someone that's been through this process before. So consider us those people. You have to be the sticky wheel, but when those things do not progress in the way that they're supposed to progress, and then they put the onus on the child for the reason why they're not willing to show up in the environment that set them up to fail. You need to know your rights and you need to be able to have the language. So Jayne talked about FAPE. FAPE stands for Fair and Appropriate Education, right? That is the job. It is the responsibility of the district. Also, how much do you know about IDEA, Jayne?
Well, I've read through it a million times and I've written all about it.
Right. So can you just describe so people just have a little bit of education on what that is?
It's an educational law, and it really was put together and written as law because kids with disabilities were not getting treated fairly and getting access to their education. So it's a very long law and statute broken up into many different parcels. But the bottom line is that it protects a child like ours who has an issue accessing their education, and it protects their rights. And it goes into all different pieces of that schools are to follow. One important thing I do want to point out, because there's so much about IDEA, I can't go into all of it, but that idea is not, a kid is not successful only by academic grades. So oftentimes a school will think about success only in academics, but IDEA says to be successful as a student under our terms, it's to become a whole person and to go beyond high school to either a job, to go to college, to go to a secondary, another education level, just to be an independent, contributing member of society. That is what IDEA wants to prepare children for. So when a school says that, your child doesn't qualify because their grades are still okay, they're not failing, it has nothing to do about that. Your child is not functioning at the level they need to move on and be a functioning member of society, and they need help.
I think you just nailed on something. And guys, I usually love to keep my podcasts to like 30 minutes, but like, I'm sorry. This is just too important to chop into a second episode. So just please stay with us. You just nailed on something that's so important. And I just pray that if someone's listening to this and they're in this boat, I want you to know you are seen and heard and understood. You can have a child that is not struggling academically, but you know that they're struggling in every other aspect of their life. Mm-hmm. And they're going to use this against you in the sense that they will say, he doesn't qualify or she doesn't qualify because their grades are too good, because their standardized test scores are too good. And what you're really saying is, I'm not willing to level the playing field because they're already okay enough. They're already okay-ish. And according to our qualifying standards, they're not failing, so it's enough. Well, what if you have a child that's getting C's and B's, but you know intellectually they're brilliant? And maybe they're not able to reach their potential because they are not being given the appropriate support and standards in order to do that. And the analogy that I love to use is, imagine there was a child in a school and the AD and the head of the track program got wind that this kid's super duper fast. And they come up to the kid and they go, "Kid, I hear you're so fast." The kid's like, "Yeah, I'm actually pretty fast." And they're like, "Well, we want you to come out and run for us because we know your potential for greatness is going to be amazing." And that kid says, "I'd love to. However, I actually have an invisible cast from my ankle to my thigh. So as long as you're allowing me to start with that handicap, maybe a little bit further ahead, maybe in just a way that makes the race fair, I'm happy to run for you." And they go, yeah. Okay, great. Just show up at practice. And then they show up at practice and they go off to the mark. And this kid's not reaching their potential. They're not running the way that they expected the kid to run. And they go, "Kid, what's going on?" "Well, I told you I have this invisible cast. It goes from my ankle to my thigh." And they go, "Well, we don't see it." He's, "Well, I'm telling you that I have it." "Well, I call bullshit. I want you to still just try harder. Just try a little bit harder. Just do it a little bit smarter. I'm sure you can do it. Just start where everybody else is. And I'm expecting you to be able to race in the race and finish at the top because I know you have the potential." And the kid tries again, and he tries again, and he tries again. And he's not meeting the mark that the school or the team thinks that that kid should meet. And they're going, "Just try a little bit more. Just try a little bit more." And he says, "All you have to do is just meet me where I am. All you have to do is just put me at the right starting spot and I can do it for you." No. So what happens? The kid stops showing up for practice. He misses a meet. And what ends up happening is the onus and the blame and the shame goes on the kid. They gave up.
Wow. I've never heard that before. That's awesome.
I made it. I created this. I used to say this to the school. I can't tell you how many times I have shared that story.
And what happens after you tell them that?
Nothing.
Wow. That's weird.
Isn't that a shame? But here's my point, guys. That is the reality of the situation.
But Stacey, I want to say that some people will get that analogy and won't be defensive and won't be like, whatever. Hopefully.
But, for the parents that are on the struggle bus with their kids, there's going to be some parents that are going to really relate to that because that's the reality. We hear you. We hear that you have this, but we really don't think it's going to be limiting enough. But even though it's showing them, I'm limited, they don't want to accept it for whatever reason. Okay. Maybe they don't want to have to explain to somebody why somebody's starting off of a different mark. Maybe they don't want to explain to one more board member or one more teacher why there's another kid with another 504. It's really not about your kid at the end of the day, because if it was, they would meet the need of your kid.
Yeah.
Okay. And the only reason why we're talking about these parts is it is a part of the equation when it comes to school avoidance. No kid just doesn't want to communicate and engage with other people.
Of course.
There is a reason that they are isolating. There's a reason why they're avoiding. And it's important to partner with the place that they're supposed to go and say, I need you to move a little bit closer towards my child. I need to know how you're going to meet him or she where they are. So that child, this is all about safety and security, feels secure enough and safe enough that you'll meet their needs, so they'll move a little bit towards you as well. They're not machines. They're people, our children. And part of their ability to engage in the relationship with the school is knowing that it's a safe and secure environment to do it, that they feel seen, heard, important, significant, enough. Mm-hmm. You are enough that we're willing to hear why you're having a hard time coming to school, and we're willing to help make it work, because that is our job. Mm-hmm. Is no matter where you are in life, to offer you a free and fair, appropriate education. That's our legal responsibility. And any district that is telling you that that is not a part of their role is not giving you the full truth.
That is true. I want to make one more point. I know we're going long. I don't know if we talked about this before. Another story that I hear all the time from parents, not all the time, but many times, is that the school will say, well, we can't do anything to help you. All you need to do is get your kid to school, and then we'll take it from there. So school avoidance is very different. That makes school avoidance such a conundrum and confusing to people, because there is something in the school or some feeling they get related to the school that makes the child feel like total distress. So what we say to the schools are, you can do things, and there are things that the doctors and evidence-based and strategies say that you can do. What you can do is you can reach out to the child at home and make a connection. Listen, it's not going to happen the first time or second time, because the child is totally scared of you, because who the heck are you? It also has to be a champion, someone the child trusts, has any kind of connection to. It can be an extracurricular person. It can be anyone the child feels safe or a connection to. And it's not one and done. It's just not like, okay, I emailed Joe and he didn't respond to me. It's not one and done. It's a sustainable, ongoing plan. This is another thing that happens all the time. When parents do get a school to work with them, they need to explain there has to be an ongoing plan. Okay, so for the month, these are the connections we've made. This is what we've tried. This is who, and it should not be reaching out to our child saying, this is the work you need to be doing. It has to be just about connecting to the child, nothing academic. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, this is great. So guys, let's just talk really quick. Jayne, share with people what the School Avoidance Alliance offers, not just for the families, but also for the districts, because maybe we've got a teacher listening, maybe we have a superintendent listening, or a Board of Ed member, or maybe we have a parent that's willing to bring these resources to the school as a possible thing that they can invest in. So what are the things that you offer?
Okay, so for parents, we have the School Avoidance Masterclass for parents with our leading psychologists and school insiders from all over the country. They are leading experts on school avoidance, teaching best practices and what works with their patients, their clients, and the school insiders teaching how to work with the school and collaborate. And she also explains the parents' role and the school's role, because that often gets confusing. Then we have the educator course for schools, and we are so grateful that schools all over the country have really leaned into this and are purchasing our professional development course called Everything You Need to Know to Get Your Students Back to School. And this is meant for counselors, principals, assistant principals, school nurses, social workers, pupil personnel, and psychologists, and truancy professionals, and other professionals. And this can all be found on our schoolavoidance.org website. And again, I just want to thank the schools who have purchased the course from us. The feedback we get is so awesome and positive. They are so grateful for this information because they didn't know it before, and it's really changed how they approached school avoidance. And same for the parents. And when they purchase our masterclass, we give them a free biweekly peer-to-peer support group for school avoidance.
That's huge. It's huge.
I didn't realize how important it was. I mean, I knew it was important, but the parents who come in and out over the year they've been so grateful to connect with other parents. So that's just another benefit.
Jayne, what's the website?
Schoolavoidance.org.
Okay, guys, this is where you need to go. Someone for sure is going to hear this podcast, and it's either your story, it's your sister's story, it's your brother's story, it's your best friend's story, it's your cousin's story, or you feel that you have the courage or the insight or the contact to go into your district and say, hey, I really think this is something we need to be more knowledgeable about as a district. And I'll tell you, this is the third or fourth time I've spoken to Jayne. I have all the feels right now because it is just so important as somebody that, is trying to educate people on mental health. This is a big one because this affects the whole family. It doesn't just affect the child that's having a hard time going to school. It affects the parents. It affects if you're in a relationship and you have a spouse and you're parenting with a spouse, it affects your partnership, your marriage. It can affect the other children in the household. This is not set in a container. And I just want you to understand, I really get that. And I highly recommend that if any of this speaks to you, to go to schoolavoidance.org, reach out to Jayne, get the information that she is so amazingly collaborated and curated, and get schooled and school to school.
Oh, thanks so much, Stacy. I love talking with you as always. You are a fierce advocate, and it's been so exciting to talk to you all these times. So thank you. And I've learned so much from you.
Oh my gosh. Well, guys, listen, if you like the podcast, you know where to find it. Go wherever you get your podcasts. It's Flip Your Mindset. We drop a new episode every single Monday. And until then, we'll see you soon.